This conference will now be recorded.
A very good morning to everyone. I would like to request Madam Jaspreet to kindly introduce the first speaker of this session. Over to you, ma'am. Jaspreet, ma'am. Over to you, Jaspreet, ma'am. Kindly introduce the speaker of the first session.
Ma'am, I am audible now?
Yes, you're quite audible.
Okay, ma'am. Can we start?
Yes, please.
A very warm welcome to all on the seventh day of FDP program. Good morning, Dr. Dhall. I just breathe on Hello.
Hello.
Ma'am, I have some connectivity issue. Now I am audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Navdeep,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Navdeep, I think we can skip this introduction and all. I think I can
Yes, sir.
proceed with the I can proceed with the session.
Yes, sir. It will take, sir,
We,
another 2 minutes, not more than 2 minutes.
okay, fine. But I think
Sorry
I
for
mean
the
there's
connectivity.
there's no need, no issues. We can skip it if there's any technical or connectivity
No
issues.
issue, please. No issue, please.
No, it's fine, sir.
Okay, please.
Yes, now I would like to introduce our expert speaker of today's first session, Dr. H.S. Tull. Dr. H.S. Tull is serving as an assistant professor in Department of Business Administration, Guru Nanak Dev Engineering College. He has almost a decade experience of serving in export marketing department with Nahar Group of Companies, Ludhiana. He has during this tenure been instrumental in implementation of SAP EEP in company. His passion for academics made him choose teaching in year 2008 when he joined the institute. Dr. H.S. Tull has research interest in investments and capital markets, and he has his doctorate in same area. He has around 15 research papers published in journals and conference proceedings. He has attended about 15 faculty development courses. He also has conducted 2 AICTE sponsored FDPs. He has actively contributed as a team leader in NAC accreditation at GNDEC. Lastly, but certainly not the least, a greener planet dream is close to his heart and he puts in relentless efforts in the direction by planning various plantation.
Thank you.
We welcome you here, sir, and over to you now.
Thank you, Jaspreet. Thank you for such a nice introduction. Uh, Navdeep ma'am, can you please give me the presentation right so I can proceed with the
Sir,
screen
already
sharing?
given to you, sir.
Okay,
given you the presentation right.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. Uh, so friends, a very good morning to all. I hope my screen is visible to you. Yes, can I please have one or two replies confirming that the screen is visible? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Uh, so, friends, welcome to this session on a cold morning. Uh, so, before we proceed, I hope all understand Hindi, and so I want to put forward a query to you all people. Uh, आप लोग ने कभी ना कभी या खुद से या अपने बच्चों को या अपने स्टूडेंट्स को किसी ना किसी लेवल पे आपने ये एक बुक पढ़ी है सबने जिसमें अल्फाबेट्स पढ़ते हैं हम लोग, बीट इंग्लिश अल्फाबेट्स और बीट अल्फाबेट्स ऑफ एनी अदर लैंग्वेज में भी, हिंदी, पंजाबी, एक्स वाई जेड। तो मेरे को प्लीज बताओगे कि उस बुक में किस तरह पढ़ाया जाता है, क्या स्पेशलिटी होती है उस बुक की जिससे हम आ ई ई उ पढ़ाते हैं या ए बी सी डी पढ़ाते हैं, उसमें क्या स्पेशलिटी होती है?
धल सर,
नमस्कार सर, गुड मॉर्निंग, क्या हाल चाल?
बढ़िया जी।
I was craving to listen from you first of all. जी
सर, एक चीज ये है कि the photograph of that particular letter is very big and it is always associated with the very common, say for example apple we start with, and a figure of apple is there.
Yes.
And children are usually aware that what is apple. Hope I am
very right, sir, very right.
Thank
you are very right, and in fact I think all the participants must have noticed this thing. वो एक मूवी भी आई थी ना, आमिर खान स्टारर मूवी थी तारे जमीन पर। तो उसमें वो दे ट्राई टू शो कि द वन ऑफ द स्टूडेंट हैज डिसलेक्सिया प्रॉब्लम एंड ही ट्राइज टू एक्सप्लेन टू द पेरेंट्स कि वो ए एप्पल होता है तो हम अपने दिमाग में एक एप्पल की फोटो बनाते हैं, तो उसी तरह से हम एप्पल को लर्न करते हैं। बट शायद वो जो स्टूडेंट है वो फोटो बना ही नहीं पाता, तो ही इज नॉट एबल टू understand the written words or the written alphabets. So my purpose of discussing this thing is that when a small kid starts learning the alphabets, we make use of pictures which are relevant, and they are they get embedded in the mind of the kid, which he or she is unable to forget throughout his or her life. So then when we are talking about higher education, engineering education, management education, or for that matter any professional education, don't you think it's equally important in such a scenario also that we should be making use of visuals to engrave that learning in the mind of the student? Because let me share with you, there has been a study which which found out that if we make use of words, simply words, in our teaching learning process, after 72 hours, once the lesson has been given, and after 72 hours if we try to see the recallability of the learners, it is not more than 10%. If we make use of only pictures, then if we see the recallability after 72 hours, it is somewhere around 35%. But if we make a combination of word as well as picture and try to see the recallability. After 72 hours, the recallability is as high as 80%. So this very much reinforces the fact that pictures are equally important in the learning process and learning for life, which we all aim at. So with this notion, I would proceed to the today's session, which is visual communication and pedagogy. So friends, let me build a background. See, as a teacher, what is the prime role of a teacher? We need to engage the learners in the classroom or in the online classrooms as we are having these days, in the physical as well as all online classrooms. The prime role is that we need to engage the learners, and we need to engage them for what purpose? The purpose is that there is knowledge construction. So now there's a shift from knowledge dissemination to knowledge construction these days, and it is very relevant as well, because earlier the concept was the teacher was to disseminate the knowledge, but now with the advent of technology, with the access of information to each and every individual, the teacher's role has changed. You need not disseminate the information, it's already with the students. You only need to discuss that information in a way that the classroom teaching comes out with new knowledge. New knowledge means knowledge construction. So that is the prime role of the teacher nowadays. And what are the different essential attributes for doing so? There are four major attributes. The first one being, there has to be a clarity of what I want to convey, what I want my learners, my students to learn, the learning goals. What is the goal of what I'm say what the session being taken today? What is my goal? I want that everybody should be aware that how visuals can play a very good role in effective communication in your pedagogy process. So I'm clear about what the goal of the session is. Similarly, a teacher has to be very clear what exactly he wants out of the session or sessions he or she is taking. Then the attitude of the teacher in terms of verbal and non-verbal communication. So this is again a very important aspect. If I come with a good mood in the class, I am always able to deliver good. But if I have had a fight in the morning and I come to the class, obviously my attitude is not that, I'm having some issues, and I'll somehow unknowingly or unknowingly I'm going to disseminate that to the students as well. So you have to come to the class in a very positive attitude, with a very positive attitude. Then another important aspect is the content, and we all understand that what we are to teach, what we are to discuss with the students, we have to formulate the content for that. We have to prepare the different components of what we are going to discuss. And then the last one is the learning aids. What different aids for teaching we are going to use? The most in current times, if I talk about say 20-30 years back, the most prevalent learning tools were blackboards or maybe whiteboards. But now all of us know that we have a lot many learning aids which are much more advanced and which give us a lot of flexibility as regards teaching learning process. In this learning aids, one of the important aid is your presentations, visual presentations. So today's session is more or less focused on the visual presentations, how we can make use of presentations in an effective way, how we can enhance the pedagogical process using very effective and very scientifically prepared, designed visual presentations. So in there's a reflection point. See, we have broadly two modes of teaching: a classroom, physical classroom teaching, and online teaching. Now this visual designing or visual presentations are equally important in both of them. And when in the current times, in this pandemic time, when we are all together shifted to online teaching, the visual part becomes more and more important also, because in the physical classroom you are, you have an eye contact with your students, you have physical presence of the students, most of the things are conveyed by your body language, by your eye contact. But in online teaching this thing is absent. So how do you cope up with that? To cope up with that, this visual presentations can play a very important role. There's a famous saying by one Yakov Agam. uh, there are two distinct, he says that there are two distinct languages. There is the verbal which separates people, and there is the visual that is understood by everybody. So what he wants to convey is that different languages, we would be, we could be having different mother tongues. I might be comfortable with English or Punjabi, the other person might be comfortable with some other language. But when we make use of visuals, the language bar itself, the language limitation itself is gone. The visuals can make the other person understand even if the language is not understandable by him or her. So friends, I have a small query with you. uh, while preparing your presentations, when you are planning a lesson, preparing a presentation, what are the generally uh, you know uh, sticky points? I would like to listen from you, or you may write down in the chat box that where do you get stuck up? What are the points where you need more of time, more of thought process before you can actually prepare your presentation? Yes, I would love to, like, I would love to have responses from you. What is the, what are the general problems that you face while preparing presentations? Okay. We have one reply: clear headings to explain. Yes. Good formatting. Stuck at how to describe in brief, how to create figures. Very good. How to present and how to speak about it. Okay, very nice. Front and background colors. Yes, this thing is very important. So basically we are facing problems at two fronts. One is the content part, how much content, how much brevity, how much, descriptive it has to be. Then the other component, how the information or the sharing of that knowledge is to be done in terms of visuals, in terms of presentation. Like we have this query that front and background colors, so that is very important. Differentiating between important not and not so important by using colors. Yes, again a very good input. So we are stuck up at these things, and these are probably the things or the points which we need to pay a larger attention so that the learning is effective. So I have just summarized these in terms of, I'm since I'm taking only the visual part, so I have summarized them, that what different problems we generally face. The segmentation of the information. Now I would, I might be preparing one topic, but there would be subtopics in that. So how to create the flow of that total lesson, what should come first, what should come in the middle, what should come at the last. So all this is related to the segmentation of the information. Then the font choice, the color choice, what font has to be used where, and what colors have to be used where, use of images and graphics, what images to be used, where to be used, how much images to be used, what graphics to be used, again how much to be used. Then use of animations, use of tables and graphs, how many tables, where do I need to put the tables, how should I put the tables in the presentation, whether they should be along with the text or whether they should be on a separate slide. So all these questions are in my mind while preparing a presentation, and these are probably the uh, you know uh, points on which I generally need to ponder upon. Now I have an example. This is one small example. One Indian boy, a 14-year boy, he actually wrote a letter to the government of United States. Now this was the text of the letter. Dear United States, I can save you 400 million US dollars. And what argument did he give? That in US the formal font which they use is Times New Roman. So he said that instead of using this Times New Roman, the if you can see in the slide the lower one, if you use the lower font with a difference, with a small difference from Times New Roman, you will be able to save ink. He made all the calculations and proved that you will be able to save ink worth 400 million US dollars. So of course in this case the idea of that boy was not taken up by the government or was not accepted by the government. Can anybody let me know what probably was the reason? Yes, looking at this slide, can anybody try to explain what's the faulty point in this proposal, why it couldn't be accepted? Yes, less visibility. So very right. And in the top portion, when we are using Times New Roman, there is much more clarity, much more readability, whereas in the lower portion, the proposal from the boy, the readability is relatively less. There is a sort of semantic noise, so the proposal was not accepted. Again, I have another example. Now I'm talking about a design. Yes, so is everything clear? It's a very complex design. And is the design clear to all the participants? Are they able to make what it is? It's a research analysis comparison of sample groups. Some samples were taken, they were formed into groups, and then a research analysis has been done for the different groups. So that has been presented in this way. So does it make any sense? Are you able to get what the author is trying to convey? No. A big no from most of you. Poor visibility. So then that leads us to this point that how you design your slide is going to make a difference. Although a lot of work has been done in this slide, I salute the person who made this slide, because he must have done so many, he must have drawn so many graphs for the data, and then maybe this final design was created. But since it is not readable, since it is not understandable by anyone amongst you, so it's a waste. Now again another example. what's in the color. So is everything, the text, the pictures, everything clear to the participants? What is there on the slide? Yes? So again, there's a no. You are unable to understand, right? So again, the point being stressed is the color. Of course, the creator of the slide has tried to use many colors to make it more catchy, but things have gone wrong somewhere. It has lost its visibility. It has lost its connect with the participants. So now we'll be moving towards that. What are the principles for creating effective visual presentations, right? So in that direction, these are the components of a PowerPoint presentation or an effective visual presentation. The first component is the planning. So in this component, we will be answering to some WH questions, like why we need to have this kind of data in the presentation, when it should occur, where it should occur, whom, what, how. So all these questions are answered. Then comes the next step, that is the execution. So what is going to be the total outline of our lesson? What are going to be the main topics? What are going to be the subtopics? What graphics we are going to use? What graphics we are going to omit? Once all this has been decided in the step 1 and step 2, then comes the third one, the X factor, which is the focus of today's session, that how we are going to impress our audience with our presentation, with our visuals, how we are going to impress upon them. So that will include three major components: color patterns, typography, and visuals. And the last component is the practice. That simply means that once you are prepared with your presentation, it's always important that you have a dry run of that presentation before presenting it to the actual audience. It is very essential, because you'll be able to pinpoint, you'll be able to acknowledge some of the maybe faults you committed, and you can cover those before you go in front of the actual audience. So practice is very important. So now we come to in the last slide, the impress factor or the X factor. We had three components. So now we'll be moving to these three components. The first one is the color selection. Now again, friends, I have a small query with you. You can just a minute. Okay, in the current slide, let me know which of the option 1, 2, 3, or 4 is going to be your preferred option, and why. You may just write in the chat box which amongst these 4 is going to be your option and why. Blue. Okay, one more blue, again blue. Okay, so from the responses, what I get is blue is the preferred option, and the reason is it is appeasing, it has good visibility, and catchy. Okay, so that's what I needed to convey, that when you make use of color, it should not simply be that you want to sketch your presentation with different colors, but you have to see from this perspective that what color used here is going to be relevant for the kind of subject you are teaching, for the kind of topic you are teaching, and how this color is going to be in terms of readability, in terms of visibility, right? Supposing I need to write a word pink, or say this very sentence, F.W. Taylor postulated the concept of scientific management. I write it with the color pink. So what's wrong in it? Pink is a very good color, but if I write this statement in pink color, is it going to be relevant? And if not, why? Okay, we have another suggestion. Latex is better for presentations than MS-PPT. Yes, ma'am. There are so many other softwares. We will not be sticking to any one software. You can make use of latex. You can use of MS, and there are so many others. So that's not a, what you can say, limitation. Pink represents art, blue is technical. Okay, that's a very good one. So when we are talking in terms of pink color, we normally associate pink with brightness and, yes, the word which you have used, Dr. Shruti, art. But when we are using blue, it is more affiliated with the technical aspects. Since we are having this statement in a technical sense, so blue is more suited. So this is what I want to convey, that when you are making use of color, it has to be relevant to the subject which you are taking up. It has to be relevant to the topic which you are going to discuss, and of course it has not to lose the visibility and the readability to the audience. So these are the principles which we need to keep in mind while selecting a color. We have to create contrast and we have to create readability. So when we need both of them, the thumb rule says that if you are making your presentation in a dimly lit surrounding, so if there's darkness inside the room, which we normally do when we are making classroom presentations, we switch off the lights, we roll the curtains, and then we start with the presentation. So in such a situation, the best option would be you make use of white text on black background, or maybe it could be another dark color in the background, say dark navy color or something like that, but with a white text on it. And on the contrary, if we are making use of a presentation in a very bright lit surrounding where there is proper light, there is no darkness, in that case it is more advisable as a thumb rule that you make use of black text on a white background to create the contrast, to increase the readability, right? Now another important thumb rule is that use of vivid colors or pale colors, right? So when we are making use of, in this particular case, see, the word vivid has been written actually with a vivid color, whereas the word pale has been written with a pale color, right? So what is creating more readability in your I mean, how do you take it, which is more readable out of these two words? Vivid. Okay, so we need to make use of vivid colors to create more readability. Pale colors, they create less readability. But there's a caution, word of caution here. If we are making too much use of vivid colors, we'll come to that kind of an example later on, then also it's a problem. So we need to make a balance. Then color selection has to be compatible with the topic. So we already discussed that. Moving ahead, now the next component is the font. Again, my query, which amongst these statements out of these 6 would be your preferred font choice? These have been written in different fonts. So what is your font choice and why? Why? Four, five. Okay. So what's the reason? Please also write the reason. Okay, 4. 4 again. Please also write the reason. Rest all are less readable and sticking to eyes. Okay, bold, emphasize the importance. Okay, dark on white background. So I think all of you understand the importance of the font. So I have got the very right answers. 4, 5. These are perhaps the more organized, more readable, with proper background and the font selection, and that's why these are the 2 preferred options. Now let's move to what are the principles as regards selection of font choice. Okay, there's before that we have another example. uh, I have heard emphasis in 6 different ways. The normal, without any additions to the word. In the second case it's bold, in the third case it's in italics, in the fourth case it's underlined, and in the fifth case there's a color, different color given to the word, and in the last case I have made it italic, bold, as well as underlined, and also a color to it. So what do you think is the most appropriate way of writing a word to emphasize that word? When we want to attach a focus to a particular word, what out of these could be the options, the better options out of all these? Yes, bold or change color. 2, just make it bold. Okay, bold or change color. Okay, so that's what I wanted to convey. And as you can see at the bottom, do not overemphasize. So in the last option, what we have done, we have made it bold, italic, underlined, color change. That is too much. So always go for one of the options, either make it bold, or make it in italics, or make it underlined, or give a color to it. But don't mix more than one option on a same word to give larger focus. Rather, it will lose its focus if you do so. And if you do it very occasionally, then your whole topic would lose its focus, its relevance. So these are the guidelines or the principles for font choice. Number of fonts to use, generally not more than 2. We should stick to 2 font sizes in our presentations and not more than 2. 2 font choices, not sizes, 2 font choices and not more than 2. For emphasizing, it is suggested to use font options like we have discussed, the bold, the italics, but make use of one of them and not club all of them together. Then you need to use a very important aspect. You preferably use left alignment feature for the text. So don't make use of center alignment or right alignment. And this is out of the research, various research conducted in visual presentation area, which have come out with the results that if we make use of left alignment, the readability, the understandability is more. So this is again a thumb rule, a guideline, that you need to use left alignment for text which you are writing on your slides. Now comes the next component, the visuals themselves, which we are making use of these two functions, animations and transition function. I hope all understand what these functions are. So what you can say, the learning point over here is that animations, yes, very important, we can use them, very effective, but the word of caution is do not use too much of animations, because they will create a cluttering and your lesson will lose its focus, lose its understandability. Similarly, use of transitions, we can make use of them, but very occasionally, not very frequently. If we are making use very frequently, again it's going to create a clutter, the lesson is going to lose its understandability. Okay, I have again a question to the participants. When you prepare your lessons, you make your presentations, what is the extent of importance you give to these two aspects, the message and the appearance? So let me have your responses. How much of the total time or effort you spend for the message part, and how much you spend for the appearance part? Yes, I have a query from Mr. Gaurav. What is transition function? Mr. Gaurav, if we go to let's now, if you are able to see my slide, this is a PowerPoint presentation. At the top in the menu, you can see transitions. When we make use of it, since this is a slide, so I'll not be able to use it, but otherwise, if I open a new PowerPoint, let me just do so. You have options over here, like say I write something over here, Gaurav, right, and I attach a transition. You see what is happening? If I use fade, it's appearing like this. If I make use of push option, it's coming like this. Wipe, something like this. So this is what is transition. You can make use of these transitions in your slides, but as I said, if you make too much use of that, it is going to create a distraction. So it's better you make use of these transition function only when you feel that it is absolutely required and it will solve some purpose, it's going to serve some purpose. So that is what is transitions. Hope I am clear in this. Yes, this is my particular. Okay, fine, Mr. Gaurav. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have a reply for my question. 70 for appearance and 30 for message, because presenting the things well is the only way to make students learn nowadays. Okay, so any other responses? How much percentage of time and efforts do you devote to the message part, and how much to the appearance part? 60-40. Okay. So friends, let me put here, we have these three options: the content, message on one side, and the form or the appearance on the other side. So it could be either this way, that your message, you know, takes a greater toll of on your time and effort, or your the second option, your appearance takes a greater toll on your time and effort, and the third component is the that you have a balanced approach. You devote almost equal time to both the components, and this is the most appropriate one, because uh, you know it's not only the content and it's not only the appearance. They have both have their own importance while you are delivering a presentation. So you make sure that you are equally devoting to your message content part as well as appearance part. So don't over emphasize on either of the two, and don't underplay the role of any of the two, right? So then we again come to certain guidelines. The content shall decide the use of color, font, and graphics. So it's your content which is going to decide that what colors to use. Like the example we discussed, that since blue color is required in that sentence because we are talking something technical, something scientific. So similarly, your content will decide what colors are to be used. If I am to use, say, if I am to write the word military, if I am to write the word military, what should be the most probable color to be used? I would I My personal viewpoint would be that I should use the military color itself, that is the olive green, right? So it gives a greater impact. And what font to be used? I would suggest to you make use of say your Calibra font, because it will give a look of a disciplined word. If I write the word uh, military in Calibra font, you can try it, and it will give you a look of a disciplined word. So it's associated with military, so it's going to be a better pick for this situation. And what graphics are to be used, again the topic will decide, right? Then there is another important rule, which is 6 by 6 rule. Now what does this rule says? That in a presentation you should not be using more than 6 bullets or 6 uh, different points. If you are making a presentation, it should not go beyond 6 points in a single slide or 6 bullets in a single slide. And also, for a single sentence, try to keep the sentence short. It should not exceed 6 words. A single sentence should not have more than 6 words. So try to be brief in writing the sentences. Too long sentences, many times we come across presentations, and generally the students do make such a mistake. They write a complete paragraph against a bullet, and it's maybe consisting of say 15, 20, 25 words. The sentence loses its focus, understandability. So stick to 6 words or lesser for one single sentence, and conduct demo test to avoid chaos. So that is again the practice component which we discussed earlier. You always need to carry out demos of what you are going to present beforehand, so that you avoid chaos on the at the point of delivery. Okay. Now again, I have a query for you. For preparing academic oriented presentations, which font type and size would you prefer? Which font type and size would you prefer? Times New Roman 14. Okay. Yes, any other? Yes, some other response? Okay, Mr. Sandeep, you have suggested Times New Roman with a 14 font size. Can you please quote the reason why would you like to use Times New Roman and why the 14 font size? Okay, we have another response, Calibre with 24 to 36 font size. Okay, kindly please quote a reason for your choice. 14 will be small for PPT. It may be larger for the PPT. Okay. So then what it should be, Sandeep ji? Okay, yes. We have a response 24 to 36. That's very nice. In case of PPTs, we generally use this font size, which has been suggested by Ms. Richa Agarwal, 24 to 36. And why we are using Calibre or Times New Roman, the two which you have suggested? Any specific reason? It is. This is on PPT so that it may be Calibri looks more formal and has clarity. Okay, very fine. So more or less we have the answers in the right direction. For a presentation, the minimum size has to be 24 for the text. So when whatever text you are writing, make sure that the minimum size is 24. It should not be less than 24. And the other part, what font choice you are going to make. Now for this we need to look at the two options we have, that is the serif font and the sans serif font. Now what's the difference between in these two font choices? Serif fonts are the fonts in which each stroke of the alphabet has a flag at its ends. Now, in the first case, the E written, if you see it closely, uh, every stroke, the horizontal strokes, the vertical stroke, at the end of the stroke, you have certain flags, certain protrusions. So these are the serif fonts, and for this, Times New Roman is one of the example. It's a serif font. The other one is sans serif font, where you omit these flags. The strokes of the alphabet, they do not carry any flags at the ends, right? And it is always advisable to make use of sans serif font in case of presentations. Now, serif fonts are very good. Times New Roman is a very accepted, font choice. But in case of presentations, try to avoid this font. Why so? Because it creates clutterness. It creates less readability. Of course, when you are writing text, a printed text in a book, say, or you are printing, you are writing something which you need to take printouts. In that case, Times New Roman is the best choice. So whenever it is going to be a published work, some printed work, Times New Roman is perhaps the best choice. But when we are going for presentations, this flaggy structure, the flags at the ends of each stroke, they create less readability, clarity. So it is advisable to make use of sans serif fonts in which the strokes of the alphabet do not have any flags at their ends. I have a small example. This perhaps all of us have witnessed at one point or the other. This is a image of the uh, reading screen which ophthalmologists have at their places. When you go for your eyesight testing, they have this kind of display which they ask you to read so that they can measure your the eyesight, what number of glasses, what is the number of glasses that you need to wear or not, you need not wear any. So in this case also, if you see it, it's the usage is of sans serif and not serif fonts. And the reason is why the clarity is higher. You try it at your own end. When you are looking at words which are closer to you, say at a distance of uh, a feet, or maybe somewhere around 1.5 feet, that is when you are reading something from the book, the serif fonts are more readable, they are more pleasing to read. But when we talk about a distant viewing, like in case of presentations, when you are making projections on a screen through the projector, the distance increases, maybe 10 feet, 8 feet. So when that is the level of distance, try to practice, try to experience this thing at your own end. You will notice that when you are using sans serif fonts like Calibra, the visibility is better, the clarity is better, and it is a scientific fact which has been proven by various researches. So whenever we are to make presentations, it's always advisable to make use of sans serif fonts. Now we have this slide with some picture and some written content over it. I have a query from you again, all of the participants. Please let me know, is it okay or is it not okay? If it is okay, why so? If it is not okay, what's the issue? The background is having strong impact. Okay. We have a reply from Rimal. The background is having strong impact. So I'm unable to understand, Rimal. Please let me know. What do you mean to say? Is it having a good impact or a negative impact? Pixel quantity is low in picture. Text may wrongly placed. Color may be dark. Okay. We have another response. So very right. As you can see here, the background is bright, light color, whereas the text written on it again is light color, that is white. We have not made use of the principle contrast. There is no contrast. The text as well as the background, they are merging in each other. So there's an issue when you are reading the text. It's creating a clutter, it's creating a noise, it's creating a disarray, right? And okay, let's put the same pic in some other way. So does it make a change now? Of course it is more readable now, more clear, but can anybody tell me what changes have been made? Can you try to enumerate, write down what different changes have been made in this particular slide as compared to the previous one? Yes, please. I need your responses. See, in this session, actually, I'm here to learn more than you people, rather than, giving my knowledge. I feel it's going to be a session where I can learn from you people. Earlier also, you have given very good responses. At some points, I have learned new things. Yes, please. Dark color text, more info about shark is added. Okay, so we definitely have used dark color for the text. It's black in color. Now it's creating a contrast with a light background. We have used the dark color. But text, okay, we have not added any information in the text. It's the same information which was present earlier. If you go to the previous slide, you read the last thing, uh, protection according to researchers, right? So again here also, if the last in the last sentence you see it's protection according to researchers, it is the same text which has been used, no addition in the text. But yes, there is some change. Apart from the color, there is some other change. That is why it is appearing to you, Mr. Gaurav is very right in saying that some text has been added. Actually, it has not been added, but something has been done which is creating a feel of addition. You are able to get the things more clearly. You are understanding the things in a better way. What has that been done? You please let me know. Yes, participants. To font size. You are referring to the font choices? You mean to say we have made use of two fonts, or you are referring to the size of the font, that is two? Okay, size. uh, yes, we can say that the heading has, uh, the size is larger in case of heading of this text, and the rest of the content has a different size. So we have used two sizes. But then if you notice, whatever text was written in the first slide, that was in a paragraph form, that was centrally aligned. Now what we have done is, we have aligned the text to the left. We have introduced bullets to differentiate between the three different points which we wanted to convey. And of course, we have changed the color from white to black. So because of these small changes, now you are easily able to make out that this slide is telling about three characteristics about shark extinction, and the three characteristics are very much clearly readable as well as understandable. So this small change has made the difference. Earlier we were not able to make out that there are 3 points and all, but now we are easily able to make out that the author has given three different points related to the risk of shark extinction. Okay, again we have another example. Now in this slide, again, some issues. Yes, what are those issues? All these things have already been discussed. So just try to recall what we discussed. The same problems have been not overcome in this particular slide. See, sorry, we have made use of more than two font choices. if you look at the word introduction, it has a different font choice. Six Sigma has a different font choice, right? Then the rest of the text has a different font choice. Then we are making use of emphasis by different ways. For 1986, we have changed the color. For Motorola, we have made it bold. For Six Sigma, some other way out, somewhere something different. So we are making use of emphasis by different techniques in the same slide. Then another big problem, this question mark, inverted question mark, has a uh, a minion sort of things sitting on it, and the text is overlapping with that. So that component of the text which is overlapping is creating a readability problem. So all these are the problems in this slide. We'll come to this slide later on with some improvements as well. So now we are, most of the things have been covered what we need to take care of in our presentations. Now we'll be moving towards a practice of what we have learned. So believe me, this is going to be very interesting. You are going to practice, you actually practice, and practice is going to be done now. You'll be given certain uh, slides, and you are to rate those slides, evaluate those slides on different parameters. How the rating has to be done, this is the technique. I'll be giving you a slide with certain content on it, and I'll be giving you a rubric as well for evaluation. So like here it is use of colors. So you are simply to focus whether the colors used have been in the right way or not in the right way, and for that you have to score them. Rubric levels and scores are provided in each task. You, like in case of colors, you will write down a low 0 if it is too much overuse of many colors, too bright or dull colors used. Similarly, moderate score is 1 if few unnecessary colors used, few bright oblique dull colors used, and a high score if requisite number of colors used, appropriate contrast taken care in color usage, right? So this is just as a sample example. So this is how the next slides are going to come, where I'll be giving you certain rubric and you have to evaluate accordingly. uh, so this is your evaluation component. You write down in the chat box the image number, which I'll provide you on the image itself. Like it's image 1, you write img1, and then write its corresponding score. If you want to give low score, then write low 0, and try to write down okay, you need not write down the reasons, it will be there in the rubric itself. So you simply need to write the image number and give your scores based on your evaluation, right? So participants, I would love if you participate in this activity, because it's really going to be interesting as well as learning for both of us. So I'm coming up with the first image. This is image 1, and in this image the rubric criteria is the use of fonts. So now you are to evaluate this slide based on this criteria, and the levels or scores which are attached to it have also been provided, so you can very well give the scores accordingly. So now I'm waiting for your responses. We can do one thing. I'll just post this link in the chat box. You can open up this very pic at your own end, because I need to sift between the slides and your chat box. So I'll do this thing. I'll put this link here, and you can open this link on your own systems. So we have the first reply, image 1 low. Okay. So now in our case, low stands for what? There have been use of too many fonts in the presentation. Very right. Many unnecessary font options used. Okay. So if someone can try to explain what unnecessary font options have been used in this slide, that would be still much better.
Dr. Saab, like in one sentence, sometimes people use more than one font, or maybe two different lines are with two different fonts, which may not be required.
Yes, yes, yes. Most of the times this is not required, and if we do so, yes, we are creating a disarray or a clutter. Yes, very right, sir. Bold italics not required so much. Very right. Then centralized text is not visible. Yes, it has lost its visibility. This non-eligibility is has lost its readability, visibility as well. So we have been very right in evaluating this on a low scale, since we are having these problems in this slide. Okay, so that's nice. We move to the next one. This is simply, the reinforcement of the principles we have gone through. Now this is the image 2, and the rubric here to be used is use of, the criteria is the use of colors. Again we have levels. uh, I'll again post the link for this slide as well, so you can open it your end. So you can open this slide at your own systems as well. I have already written the link in the chat box. Image 2 low. Okay, we have a response from Mr. Gaurav. Image 2 has a low. Then Jaspreet, Madam Jaspreet again, image 2 low. So what's the issue? Low here, low score means too much overuse of many colors and too bright oblique dull colors used. So that is quite visible. There's a lot of colors used, and while going through the slide we are lost in the colors itself rather than focusing on the text, what the slide is going to convey, trying to convey. That purpose is lost. We are more engrossed in the colors, in differentiating the colors. So very right in evaluating this slide, that it is using more colors than required, and the colors used also have very bright or very dull nature, so there's not a balance. Okay, we move still to the next image. Now in this one, the criteria for evaluation is alignment. So accordingly you have the scores. So please evaluate this one as well. Again, I am posting the link for this slide. So already I have some response. Image 3 score 2. Okay, so what does score 2 stand here? High. Okay, so that means highly aligned text offering high readability. So this is again reinforcing the earlier read concept that we have to make use of left alignment. So in this slide, as all of you can see, left alignment has been used, and that is creating higher readability. So this slide, gets a score high on this rubric criteria alignment. You have to focus only on the rubric criteria. Maybe there are some other issues in this slide, but we have to focus only on alignment in this particular slide. You need not worry about the colors or the background and all. Forget about that for a moment. Just focus on the criteria which is given in a particular slide. Okay, so we move ahead. Now this one, first let me post the link so that you are able to open it up. This is the next slide. Okay, the link is already posted. Okay, so now the criteria is use of images. So please try evaluating this slide now. Okay, image 4, high, moderate. Okay, these are the responses, but majority responses are high amongst the given ones. Now see in this image, uh, for the evaluation of the criteria images, see, there are two things. Images used are not relevant, first point. The second component is reference of the image not given. Now if we see in this slide, the image of course has relevance. Together everyone achieve more, but there is no referencing of the image. So this is one another additional input, that whenever we are making use of certain images, we need to reference them in our slides as well. What is the source of this image, right? So it's not mentioned in this slide. What is the source? We need to acknowledge the source as well, right? And of course, uh, appropriate image used. Now you have given high score, but don't you think image used is correct, but the way it is used is somewhat unsatisfactory? Because see, the text and the image are overlapping and they are creating a disturbance. You have to look a little more keenly to observe that what is at the back of the text. So there is some issue. So perhaps I would give a score 1, not 2, a moderate one. Okay, the next image we have is this one. The criteria to be used is the size of the images. Now this is one common mistake which we generally do. We put too many images on a single slide when we need to show something, say particularly when you are trying to show some uh, say a cycle, like say a product life cycle or industry life cycle, this kind of things. When you want to show on a slide and you have different blocks or different images which you want to put together, you put them on a single slide and it creates a disturbance. It's creates an array. Now here the rubric criteria is size of images, and uh, okay, let me have your response first. What do you think about this slide? Whether it should have a low, moderate, or a high score? This is image 5. So image 5 we have a response low. Yes, of course, it's very, very much evident that since there are so many images, the size is small for each image, and we are unable to make out exactly what's there to be displayed in each image. Some of them are a little bit more visible, but on the whole we are unable to make out what exactly they are showing. The heading shows field surveys, crop cutting and farmer recall, but how the process is proceeding, what exactly is being done is not very clear. Okay, so we move next. Now here in this case, in this image, the rubric criteria is slide background. So please quickly have me your responses. Let me have your responses. What do you think about this slide as regards to slide background?
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
We found in 1960.
Very good morning, sir.
Hello. Hello, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Very good morning, sir. So we are having a second session from 11:30. So let's wait
Yes,
for
yes.
10 to 15 minutes let the other participant come.
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course, sure. I actually
Sure, sir.
thought it was 11, and now just I checked. It was 12:30.
Sure, sir.
It's
Thank
completely
you,
fine.
sir.
No issues. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, sir. Shall we start, sir?
Yeah, sure, Anjali, yeah.
Okay, sir. A very good morning to all the participants. Now I would like to introduce our expertise of this session, Dr. Subhajit Roy. Dr. Subhajit Roy is an associate professor in the Computer Science and Engineering Department at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, India. His research interests are in applying formal methods as well as artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques to solve problems in programming languages and software engineering. He currently focuses on attacking problems in automated debugging and repair, program synthesis, and testing. In the past, he has also worked on compiler optimizations and program profiling. He has spent about 10 years in academia and more than 3 years in industry. Other than designing new courses and teaching both undergraduate and graduate courses in IIT Kanpur, he has been invited for guest lectures and talks at universities, summer schools, and workshops, both at national and international venues. So I again welcome you here, sir. Over to you now.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, my screen is visible, right? So I cannot make out anything from my end as to. Okay, so can you please confirm if my screen is visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So let me get started. So essentially, wait, so why is this not going? Okay, just 1 minute. I'm having some problems with. Um, Okay, so in this lecture we will look at some tips on preparing a lecture, and we will be sort of learning from the science of storytelling. So it's pretty interesting that people have researched a lot as to what constitutes a good story, and so let me just go to. So the problem is, if I go to the full screen mode, I will not be able to see the chat. So please feel free to talk whenever you would like to discuss anything. If I'm not on full screen, it looks a bit difficult to change slides. I don't know which one to do. Right. So let me start by saying that storytelling sort of has like from the very early days, people have talked about what constitutes a good story and what does not, and what is more interesting, what stories are more interesting than other stories, how stories have to be told. And in this lecture, we will see that whether we can sort of learn from the art of storytelling and bring it to the art of giving lectures. So to begin with, let us try to think as to what is a story. So I have put this together from this particular site, and essentially this sort of says that a story is a plot or a succession of events. Well, they may be true or fictitious events, and they may be told in prose or verse, which is designed to interest, amuse, or interest the hearer or the reader. Now let us try to see what we would say is a lecture. So if I change the above definition, we can sort of say a lecture is nothing but a plot or a succession of facts instead of there being a succession of events. They should mostly be true, because they are facts, and they are designed to interest, amuse, and instruct the hearer or the reader. So there are points of similarities between story and a lecture, and of course there are dissimilarities, but the question is that can we bring in learnings from writing good stories to creating great lectures. So everybody likes stories. We have been hearing stories from our childhood, And there is this very interesting article in Wired which says that just as the brain detects patterns in visual forms of nature, be a face, a figure, or flower, even in sounds, like saying that this is a tune from a certain place or so, it also tries to detect patterns in information. So stories are recognizable patterns, and in these patterns we find meaning. We try to use stories to make sense of the world and to share that understanding with others. So they are signals within this noise. Uh, this, so all it says is that stories are sort of patterns which our brain can identify very easily. So what is the sort of patterns, right? So now there is this notion of telling a story, but it is very interesting to notice that a lot of times we see that there are some excellent stories which fail to catch the attention of of the hearer or the listener or the viewer. Um, like oftentimes you would see that there are some not so nice movies, but you would see that the story they had was really interesting. At the other times we see that some of the times we get bestsellers and blockbuster movies out of stories which are not that interesting. So what goes into telling a story? So there is a science to storytelling, and in this particular talk we will try to see if we can use the same science for planning a lecture, right? So what is this pattern of storytelling that our brain understands nicely? So there is this article called "The Science Behind Storytelling" by Carl Aviani, and essentially what it says is that humans, both anecdotally and in numerous trials, respond mostly to stories that have some particular structure. And this structure looks as follows: you have a character, and in the story, the author has makes us interested in the character. Now the character has some sort of a goal, which is backed by a very clear, understandable motive. Now through the story, the character you would see has not reached its goal, and there are a lot of obstacles that are there in the path of endangering it from reaching the goal, and then leading to possible failures. And as the story progresses, the story essentially shows how the character struggles to meet the goal. And there are allied characters and resources that come in and help him overcome the obstacles. And finally, the once the obstacle is overcome and the goal is reached at the end of the story, you see that there is a new normal which has got established, uh, and they may open up a new goal. But essentially it says that now the hero of the story, or the primary character in the story, uh, is his life is somewhat different than the life he had started off with in the beginning of the story. So this is a very standard pattern, and you would see almost any story sort of falls into exactly this pattern. And what makes it different is the characters are different, the goals are different, the obstacles are different, but at the end of the day the pattern remains the same. So people have identified some basic elements to storytelling. So the primary basic element to storytelling is something what is referred to as a setting. So the setting says when and where the story is positioned. The character, whose story is it? How do they evolve through the story? Something what is sort of referred to as the character arc. The plot. The plot essentially says how the story unfolds. So what are the events? How the events progress one after the other? Uh, what is the conflict? So what is the problem or challenge that sets up the trajectory of the story? So what is the problem or the primary challenge that the hero is striving to overcome in the story? And then there is this theme of the story which says what is the central message of the story? Why is the story even being told? And there are some other slightly advanced elements The first being the narration, which says that who is narrating the story. So what is he seeing? What can he see? What can he not see? Can he be trusted? Right? So there is this elements of narration. The tone of the story. So is it a happy story? Is it a funny story? Is it a tragedy? So what are the main emotions related to the story? And the style. So how is the story being narrated? What are the sort of dialogues? What are the metaphors being used? I'm sorry. Right. So these are the basic elements to a story, and we will try to examine the more interesting elements because of lack of time, and we will try to see if we can bring those elements into our lectures as well. Okay, so let us try to take an example, and we will pick up this movie called Lagan, which I hope all of you have seen, and we will try to see how do these elements of the story come about in this particular movie. So to begin with the setting is somewhere in the early 1980s in this village called Champaner, and the main character of the movie is Bhuvan. So he's the hero of the story. So it is Bhuvan's story that we are going to see in the movie. And the antagonist is this guy called Captain Andrew Russell, and he would essentially create challenges for the hero, and we would see that how does Bhuvan overcome those challenges. So the plot of the story progresses as follows. So there are these tax problems in the village. Then Bhuvan decides to place a bet. The Bhuvan then assembles a team to play this cricket match. He prepares for the match. Then there is this final match, and then finally Bhuvan's team wins the game. So that's how that's the primary plot. That's the main plot of the story. So that is the sequence of events you see in the story. So there is a conflict. So it says that how does a team of rookies win against a strong side? So that is what the conflict is. That Bhuvan's team is they had not even heard of what is cricket, and they have to win a match against a very strong side. Um, the primary theme of the story is this thing, like it can be like sort of summarized in saying that the truth and courage finally wins. Like you have this very nice song saying such और साहस है जिसके मन में अंत में जीत उसी की रहे. So that's sort of the theme of the story. The narrator is like Amitabh Bachchan starts off narrating the story. The tone is patriotic, and the style is, we will talk more about the style, but if you see in terms of the dialogue, for instance, these are rural dialogues, sort of the tones. And these are sort of my analysis of the story, and please feel free to differ. I mean, that's the beauty uh, of this area, where you can decide to have your own opinions. So that this is how I would see the main elements of the story, and you might sort of differ from what I believe. So let us try to look at these interesting elements slightly in more detail. Character, plot, conflict, style, and narration. So to begin with, let us talk about the character. So the primary character or the hero of the story or the protagonist essentially must be a likable character, and the audience must connect with the hero, right? Unless, like, even if he does bad things, like even if he's like a thief, he's a good thief. Like, I mean, he has a good heart. I mean, somebody like Robin Hood. Um, so he has some strengths. So he's somewhat special. So he's sort of different than a regular guy. It may not be that he's very strong, or but even his innocence, or there may be a sympathetic attitude about him, or he has a very good heart, or there must be something about the hero that makes us interested in the hero. So why are we interested in his story and not somebody else's story or everybody else's story? And most importantly, the hero has some weaknesses. So he's not all strong. There are some weaknesses, and the story is about how these weaknesses are overcome through the story. Like even if it's a story about Superman, for even Superman, there is this kryptonite, which is his weakness, right? So there has to be some sort of weakness, otherwise the story doesn't become very interesting. At the same time, there is this other character, the antagonist, and the antagonist need not be a person, and we will see that it just might be nature. Like for example, you had the movie called Twister, where you see this Twister coming in. So it could be just be the force of nature, or it could be just the society. If it's a person, I mean, like you have to even set up the antagonist properly, so the characters must be set up properly. It's in this case, he or she should be somebody that you really hate, and it should be stronger than the hero. Like for example, Gabbar Singh's gang in Sholay, that makes him really strong. Or Mugambo's army. So he has this very powerful army and a lot of people who help him out. So that makes an interesting challenge for the hero. That's what makes a strong villain, makes the hero strive harder and makes the story more interesting. Uh, and then there is this notion of a character arc. So essentially, the story is about the evolution of the protagonist, so such that he eventually overcomes weaknesses. Till finally she's able to defeat the villain or the antagonist. So the character arc sort of summarizes. So there is this very nice book called "Creating Character Arcs" by Villain, and sort of the crux is that the evolution can be summarized in, to begin with, that the character believes in some sort of a lie, and there are certain things the character wants, but essentially there are certain things the character needs. And to begin with, in the story, the character does not understand the difference between his wants and needs. um, Eventually the character is caught between this truth and lie, so he starts seeing something different. He starts seeing that what he believes is in a lie, and he starts seeing that there must be some other truth that he doesn't understand very well. And then there's a final realization, and he adopts a truth, saying, like, he finally understands that this is what is meant to be believed. So again, if we come back to Lagan, if you look at Bhuvan's character arc, so like, to begin with, he thinks that he alone can change the world. He tries to tackle the Britishers on his own. He hides behind bushes and tries to distract their prey. And then you can see his sort of arrogance by seeing that how he just stands in front of everybody and places a bet without even consulting others, even without thinking that he will even need others to help him win that bet. But through the story, he realizes that he does need others, and that is where he starts striving to create this team, his team of cricketers. Um, he learns from them. He starts finding out their strengths and weaknesses, and figures out how to really use them to win his match. He also gets help from Elizabeth, who sort of teaches them how the rules of cricket and how the finer points of the game. And finally, he recognizes that at the end of the story, he sort of recognizes that it's a victory for the team, and not just the team, probably for the whole village, and just not his own. Some other stories, for instance, have still very nicer character arcs. Like if you look at Sholay, I mean, you would see that the character arcs for Jay and Viru are still more interesting. Like to begin with, they are really petty, selfish thieves. Um, Even when Thakur sort of gives him his offer to capture Gabbar, they sort of plan to that pocket Thakur's money and then run away. So that was their initial plan. But through the story, you see that they wake up to Thakur's story. They start getting sympathetic with what has happened to him, and they realize that the village is in the village is being oppressed by the dacoits. And then finally they decide not to take any money for catching Gabbar. They become selfless warriors who fight for the village and not for their own cause. And Jay eventually even selflessly gives up his life for the cause. And Viru, and that's again a very interesting point in the story, where like Viru, who was like shown to be very selfish to begin with, even after knowing that Gabbar had killed Jay, he sort of decides to let Gabbar go and let Thakur take his revenge on Gabbar. Right? So it's a pretty nice character arc, going all the way from being really selfish people to really selfless people who sort of see their goal as to help out the village rather than uh, their own petty motives. The next comes the plot. So the plot is probably the very important, probably the most important component of the story. So this says that how the story is being told, um, and it dates back to all the way to Aristotle, who talked about this dramatic structure theory, and he sort of proposed this three-act structure. So, the what he says is that the story should be sort of be divided into three parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. So it looks very simple, but then for every story you would see that there is a very nice transition point where it goes from the beginning to the middle and the middle from the end. So this is referred to as the three-act structure, and and people have talked about this, and there is this article where Bell actually talks about that you get from the middle to the beginning to middle, from Act 1 to Act 2, and middle to end. And this is a matter of transitioning. And instead of calling these plot points, you should think them as transitions to doorways of no return. So once you go from the beginning to middle, something has changed in the situation in such a way that the normal that you had in the beginning, you cannot go back to that normal. So things have to move forward. There is no way to retract your decisions. And same with the middle to end. So things go transition in such a way that once you see the situation that is there at the end, you cannot go back to the middle. So these are sort of doorways to no return. I mean, once you go into the middle phase, there is no way to come back to the normalcy that you had in the beginning situation in the story. So you can sort of, people have talked about, I mean, this is exactly how it's set up. I mean, there is this inciting incident in the middle of the Act 1. So it begins with setting up the story, and then there is inciting incident in the story, which sort of sets up the story. And then you transition, you have the plot point 1, which makes you transition into the second act. Then there is the midpoint, which becomes, which sort of starts creating tension. And then you have the plot point 2, where you get to Act 3, and the Act 3 has the climax, which is the height of the tension, and then finally there is a resolution. So if you see the second figure, you would see that there is this there is this, you set up the, in Act 1 you set up the character, you set up the conflict, you set up the settings. In Act 2 there is a rise in tension, there is a rise in the conflict, and in the Act 3 you get to the height of tension, and you reach the climax, and finally you have the resolution, and the tension falls down. People have refined the three-act structure, and people have come up with this. There is this book by Fetag where he talks about the technique of drama, and where he talks about what he proposes as the Freytag pyramid, where he talks about a 5-act structure, or even including subpoints 7-act structure, instead of it being a 5-act structure. So you begin with having an exposition where the story is set up. Then you have an inciting incident, which sort of gets you into this rising action, where you start seeing that how the conflict is being set up and how the hero starts coping up with the conflict. Then you reach up this climax, and then there is falling action, where you see that how the story, the hero is coping up with the conflict, and how does he is able to like overcome it, and eventually you have a resolution which transits into the denouncement, where you see that now everything is happy or everything is very sad if it's a tragedy, and then there is a new normalcy than what you had begun with. And here, if you compare it with the three-act structure, in the three-act structure, you see that the climax is somewhere in Act 3, which is sort of the middle of Act 3. But out here, you would see the climax is somewhere in the middle. So there is a larger part of the story where the hero is, there is a lot of tension, and the hero tries to cope up with the conflict. So if you look at the pyramid, I mean, the exposition is where the story and the background is set, what is referred to as the backstory. And then you have this inciting incident. There is some very important incident that happens, which triggers an important sequence of events that leads to a climax. There is rising action, and there is some sort of complication, and the character faces many hardships. There is a climax, so there is that's a point of greatest tension. I mean, there is then and the hero sort of has really gets into a very sticky situation. Then there is falling action. The story starts shifting, and you see a reversal of fortune. So where the hero was struggling, you would start seeing that the hero is sort of started winning. There are still some hardships. He still has to overcome many challenges, but you start see that he starts winning small battles, and the situation slowly improves for the protagonist, and finally you reach the resolution where the hero finally solves the problem and defeats the antagonist, and finally you have denouncement where you have a ending. You see the new normal established, and you hope that in the future it's something like and they live happily ever after sort of an ending where you say that, oh, everything is well and there's a new normal and it's different than whatever you started off with. So hero is happier or more satisfied than what he started off with. There are many subplots. It is not this simple. I mean, so there are many subplots. The rising action of the story is where the protagonist sort of is training herself for taking up the challenge. So there are many interesting subplots here. There are many. Each of the subplots might have a very similar structure, where there is an inciting incident, and then there is a climax, and then there is some sort of resolution. But this story is still about the rising action. Is still the story about how the protagonist trains himself or herself for matching up to the strengths of the antagonist. Then you have the falling action where the protagonist actually finds the antagonist, and this is where again you would see a lot of small battles where some of them the protagonist wins, some of them the antagonist wins, and finally you see but you start seeing a pattern where the protagonist starts winning more battles than the antagonist, and that leads you to the renouncement where he finally wins the war. So again, there are like multiple subplots within the rising and the falling actions, each having their own climaxes and their own resolutions. So you can think of them as small battles, and then the final the whole story being one big war. Now going back to Lagan, I mean, if we again take the example of Lagan, um, so the exposition is where for example we start hearing about Champaner, and then there is this, you see this problem of Champaner where there are not much rain and everybody is looking up at the sky to see if it's there going to be rain this year. Then you see the British camp established. You see the king sort of being dictated by the Britishers. There's this problem of Lagan, and people have to sort of think out how they're going to pay their taxes, and the Britishers sort of ask for double the tax. Um, there are hardships, and then you also start seeing Bhuvan. You start see that he has this very rebellious character. He's sort of he tries to he doesn't really like the Britishers so much. He's really detests that they have camped around his village, and you see that he sort of trying to like, so there's this one very nice scene where he tries to when Captain Russell was trying to shoot a deer, he tries to distract the deer so that he misses his shot. So you see that he's trying to take sort of panga with the Britishers, and sort of he wants to sort of walk up to the Britishers and take up a challenge with them. Then there is this inciting incident. Then there is this very interesting plot point where Bhuvan sort of takes the bet, right? And that sort of sets up a very different tone to the story. And then he has to, and if you can think of it, there is again then there is a sort of a point of no return in some sense, right? So once he has taken up the bet, once there is a bet that if he loses, that he's gonna pay triple Lagan, then there is no coming back. He cannot come back to the new normal saying that no, we have to go back to the original thing, and okay, we will pay double the tax but not triple tax or whatever. I mean, he cannot go back on his word. So now there is this point of no return. Whatever happens, he now has to play that game, and he has to sort of defeat the Britishers. And then there is this rising action where you see him tackling the like training himself for the game. So he does not get the room. So there are these many small battles where like getting each teammate was a battle. So he had to win these many battles to get each of the teammates. So for everybody, he starts like some of them he tries to flatter them. For some of them, he tries to challenge them. For some of them, he tries to incite them. I mean, so there are different ways he gets his different teammates. Um, then he starts identifying their strengths. Now he doesn't know how to play the game. Then you see this small battle where he wins, where Elizabeth decides to come and help him out. Then he sees that his bowling attack is weak, so he doesn't know how to win that challenge. Then he finds Kachra, and then Kachra becomes his lead spinner. That he decides that okay, this is the guy who can really take us to victory and really have one big strength. So this is the time when, so even the rising action, you see that there are a lot of very interesting points where where Bhuvan is trying to help out, like he's training himself or training his team to take up the challenge. And then there is this climax, and the climax is where you start having this match, where this match starts and you start playing the two sides team up against each other. And then you start seeing this falling action. So you still see this falling action where in the begin with the Britishers really start hitting Bhuvan's team all around. And the Kachra starts bowling, his ball doesn't spin. Everybody thinks that Bhuvan is now gonna lose. There's nothing that you can do. He then gets a wicket. Now there's a small battle that is won, and you can see some reversal of fortune on the side of the protagonist. But then Captain Russell is still at the crease, and he starts building up a huge score with a couple of guys. Not much wickets fall after that. Um, and then there is a very interesting twist to the story, and that sort of shifts you to the more interesting point where Kachra's ball starts spinning. Right, he sees that his ball starts spinning. In fact, he ends up taking a hat trick, and then people believe that well he can hit the game. So now you see in more detail the reversal in fortunes. The other bowlers pitch in. Bhuvan starts. Then the Britishers get out, but they have a huge score. When Bhuvan's team starts batting, their opening partnership goes well, but then there is a flurry of wickets, and then the story sort of shows how they try to get near the score, and finally sort of he's stuck with Kachra. So you see that the height of the tension, I mean, where I mean it's only like the last wicket there, and Kachra cannot bat, and sort of Kachra is on the batting end, and somehow Bhuvan has to, now that's the height of the tension, and like people are like on the edge of the seat that how it's going to resolve. And finally Bhuvan hits a six. I mean, they get a no ball, and finally Bhuvan hits a six and wins the match. So you see that how the plot sort of progresses through exactly the same plot point. So it's such a very methodical set of the way the very predictable way, predictable in the sense, the predictable in terms of the elements of the story, how the story sort of progresses. And finally, there is this moment where there is this ending where the British camp is removed, and it starts raining, and like Champaner sort of lives happily ever after, sort of a feeling that we get at the end of the story. So all I was trying to show through this example was no matter what story, a movie or a book that you pick up, you should start looking at it from the perspective of this structure or this very nice pyramid of saying how the story is going to be plotted, how is it going to be structured. And the interesting part is that there is not one story, but there are stories within the story. So there are multiple nice ups and downs during the rising and falling actions, and that is what keeps the viewers on their seat, on the edge of their seat. So now let's talk about the conflict. People have sort of divided conflict into what are called the internal and the external conflicts. So internal conflicts are where the conflict is within the person, where the person is trying to argue with himself as to how he's going to overcome the challenge. So the challenge is something within him, and he has to fight with himself. So he has to change himself such that the challenge can be met. On the other hand, there are external conflicts, like there can be conflict between people. I mean, person versus person. I mean, there can be like Mr. India versus Mugambo, or Jai Viru versus Gabbar sort of conflicts, where you have one person competing with the other person. There can be conflicts of person versus society. There can be conflicts of person versus nature. So there have been stories about, or movies about, earthquakes or twisters and so on, and they essentially say that how does nature come in and play the antagonist, where the hero has to cope up with this very very strong force. um, there are stories about the like, for example, stories on robots, where like if you look at the Terminator series, so there are I mean, the hero has to um, match up with technology. I mean, there is this very advanced robot that comes in and starts attacking him, and somehow he has to build up to defeat technology. And then there are stories about fate and supernatural, where, like, I mean, there are stories about ghosts, or there are stories about it's just fate that things change in a certain way, and then the hero has to cope up with the situation and live up to it. So I mean, so you would, so these are what the literary conflicts, these are the well-known literary conflicts that stories are about. um, the primary purpose of the conflict is to provide the protagonist with a goal, with an objective, and the story is about how the goal is going to be met, how the hero is going to live up to the expectations, and live up, I mean, and really reach the goal. um, now the goal must have some interesting characteristics. I mean, the goal must be challenging to begin with, right? I mean, the protagonist must have to improve himself to achieve the goal, and that creates a very interesting rising action, right? I mean, to begin with, the hero is not strong enough, is not capable enough to defeat it, to reach the goal. But then he or she starts training to sort of do it, to meet the goal, and sort of that should create a very nice character arc. The transformation of the protagonist should create a very nice character arc, which says that how did this person change himself such that he can achieve something which, to begin with, looked difficult to achieve. The second thing about the goal is that the goal must be concrete. It must be extremely concrete. You should be able to really define very, very crisply that exactly what is that the hero needs to achieve. Often there are multiple goals. I mean, there are goals within goals. So the higher level goals may be more abstract, but at the end, there is a core goal which is extremely concrete, and which is, once you achieve it, you know for sure that you have achieved it or not. Like, for example, a goal like the hero wants to be happy. Now that's a very abstract goal. I mean, what makes him happy? Why would he be happy with something like that? So it's very difficult uh, to say that, to achieve that goal, right? I mean, like for example, again, going back to Lagan, I mean, the goal was that Champaner wants to be a happy village, right? I mean, Bhuvan somehow wants to make Champaner happy. That's sort of the abstract goal. Or somehow he wants to defeat the Britishers. He wants to show that he's capable of, they are capable of defeat. I mean, from the hands of the Indians. So, but those goals are extremely abstract. So what the storyteller did is that uh, we are given a very very concrete goal. The concrete goal is that go win a cricket match. That's it, right? So you very crisply know that a cricket match has to be won, and that is all that we care about. So we know that for sure that the goal is achieved when it's achieved. And as a result of you winning the cricket match, I mean, you start seeing that probably the abstract goals would start getting matched up. Then the next thing is about the style of the story. For example, there is this very popular quote, and sort of misquoted. I mean, what he said was slightly different. So there is this very nice quote by Chekhov which says that, "Don't tell me the moon is shining, show me the glint of light on broken glass." So he says that don't just don't just say that, oh, there is a moon and I can there is moonlight everywhere. Say that, okay, I can see the moon on this small piece of glass which is lying in one corner of the terrace. So it sort of says that, show me from the eyes of the of a character what really tells you that the moon is shining, rather than just saying that the moon is shining. That makes for a very interesting story, because the reader starts experiencing the story rather than just listening to the story. Right? So um, there are more many discussions on Chekhov's comment of this principle called show don't tell, and Bell, for example, gave this exception to the rule. So he says that show don't tell is very expensive. It takes a lot of effort, lot of words, lot of space to really show everything that is going around. So don't try to use show don't tell for everything. Keep it for the interesting parts of the story, the more prominent parts of the story. In general, you should uh, tell, like, so that you can move through the story more quickly, but then reserve the show don't tell for more dramatic events that you want to stand out. Right? And so use tell whenever you want to make the narrative go quickly, and use show for the more important dramatic events that you want uh, to stand out. More on show don't tell has been this brilliant article, probably one of the best articles around on writing, called this nuts and bolts, the thought verbs by Palane. So what it says is that from the point of from this point forward, at least for the next half year, you may not use thought verbs. Now, these include words like thinks, knows, understands, believes, realizes, wants, remembers, imagines, desires, and hundreds of words that we generally tend to use. Or say that somebody loves someone or somebody hates someone. So these are words we should try to avoid, and we should instead try to try to show the reader why uh, uh, why somebody wants somebody, or why somebody loves somebody, and so on. So there is this again, this really brilliant article, and I don't know if it's that readable, but there are many interesting examples that that he uses. Like, for example, like saying that somebody is saying that, like, for example, instead of saying that waiting for the bus, Mark wanted to worry about how long the trip is going to take. A better breakup might be to say, so here, like, you are telling the reader that he's worrying about that. I mean, he's worrying about the length of the trip, or how long it's going to take the trip. But instead of saying that, you can actually show it to the reader by saying the schedule said that the bus would come at noon, but Mark Watch said that it was around already 11:57. You could see all the way down the road, and as far as the mall, and not he could see as far as the mall and not see a bus. No doubt the driver was parked at the turnaround, the far end of the line, taking a nap. The driver was kicked back, asleep, and Mark was going to be late. Of course, the driver was driving, and he had pulled up drunk and charged Mark 75 cents for death in the fiery traffic accident. So whatever it is, I mean, he sort of paints a very nice picture as to what is going on, rather than saying that he's just worrying about the length of the trip. Right? So that sort of makes up for a very interesting read. And I would really encourage you to read up this article. It's a very short article, but very interesting article. The other principle that people have sort of coined and sort of popularized in this elementary principles of composition, the elements of style, one of the very nice books on style, uh, is that where the author talks about that a sentence should contain no necessary words, a paragraph no and a paragraph no unnecessary sentences, for the same reason that a drawing should have no unnecessary lines, uh, and a machine no unnecessary parts. This requires not that the writer makes all the sentences short, but that he avoids all detail and that he avoid all details and treat the subjects only in outline, but that every word tells. Right. So essentially, what it says that it's not that you just have to sketch out something, uh, but you have to ensure that every single word that you write, every single sentence that you write, every single paragraph that you write really adds something to the story. Uh, Another very interesting principle that Ernest Hemingway, one of the great authors of short stories, actually said was he proposes something referred to as the iceberg theory. So he says that a few things that I found to be true, if you leave out important things or events that you know about, the story is strengthened. If you leave out or skip something because you do not know it, the story will be worthless. So the test of any story is how good the stuff is, not what your editors on it. So essentially, he says that a lot of times it is actually, so it's like in a story you just show the tip of the iceberg and let the reader imagine the rest of the iceberg, right? So don't tell him everything. Leave something to his or her own imagination. And if you think that the reader will be able to, you know what you want the reader to believe or reader to think, and that is why you left it out, because the reader can think it out, that's fine. But if you leave out something because you are yourself not sure about it, then probably the story is going to be worthless because the reader will go astray. So, so it is sort of a stronger form of uh, getting conciseness. The next thing is about the elements of narration. So, in narration, there are multiple things. Like, for example, there is this notion of a point of view. It says that how is the story being narrated? It's about the tense. In what tense is the story being narrated? So is it the present? Is it the past tense? Like you say that, oh, Ram came and did something to his house, or is it the present tense that Ram comes and does something to his house? And a lot of times you have historic novels where what is referred to as a past present, which means that it is actually history, it is actually past time, but then it is looking like the event is happening now, right? For example, you have Ramayana being shown, but then you see Ram actually shooting the arrow right now, right? So and things could be in the future, like for example you could think about the year 2019 2050, or and say that what happens. I mean, there are movies about time machines and so on, and you can think about what might happen in the future. And there are multiple techniques. So there is this what is referred to the team of consciousness, where the you just there are just the narration is about the inner thoughts of the characters. And a lot of times there are very interesting narration angles, like unreliable narrator, where the narrator cannot you cannot even believe the narrator. So the narrator can also lie to you, and that makes for a very interesting narration, where you yourself do not know, you yourself are not very sure as to can you believe the narrator. And uh, so there are multiple different points of view angles that people think about. Like for example, there is this first what is referred to as a first person narration, where the protagonist speaks or the hero, so you see everything from the point of view of the hero, so the hero tells his or her story, right? So the second is that there is this what is referred to the first person peripheral view, where there is another person, somebody other than the protagonist, which is who is dictating the story. But then she might be talking about the main character. Like for example, if you remember the movie Three Idiots, you see that the story is told in the voice of Farhan, though the main character was Rancho, right? Even if you see the Sherlock Holmes movies, Dr. Watson is narrating the story, though you are actually hearing the story about Sherlock Holmes. And the first person is a very intimate narrative style, and essentially it brings us very close to the person whose story is being told. And a lot of times, I mean, there can be narratives about inanimate things. Like, for example, there's a story of this coin where the coin tells what it goes through every day, right? I mean, it creates for very interesting narrations. There is this second person narration where the the audience is made a character in the story, right? So you are made a character in the story, and the narrator says that imagine that you are here and what would you do, something like that. Like, for example, there is this very nice opening lines from Bright Lights, Big City, by J. McLearning. So what he says is that you are not the kind of guy who would be at a place like this at this time of the morning, but here you are, and you cannot say that the terrain is entirely unfamiliar, though the details are fuzzy. So you are brought in. So you are not the kind of guy. So you are in that terrain where something happens. So you are brought into the story. And then there is this third person narration, which is called, so there are again multiple ways of doing third person narration. So there is this third person omniscient view, which is what is referred to as the eye of God, where the narration is from the angle of the narrator who knows everything about everybody, and he can see everything, and then he or she dictates the narration, goes about what is going on. The second is what is referred to as a third person limited view. So it's a view of one character, where this one character goes and says what she's able to see. And you cannot see anything beyond what she sees. And finally, there is this third person objective view, where you can just see what the characters are doing, but you cannot, for instance, listen to their thoughts. You cannot have a stream of consciousness. You cannot see what they are thinking. And often there are multiple viewpoints, where a story, some part of the story is in one narration style, some other part of the story is in another narration style, and so on. So a lot of storytellers try to mix up the story so that you get multiple narration styles, and that also gives a very nice flavor to the story. Okay, so this is sort of an introduction to the science of storytelling. Let me take a small break, and I would be happy to take any questions at this point. So I'm sorry I was not able to see the chat for the moment, but now I've switched back to the chat. I will happy to see if you have any questions, and please feel free to speak out if you have to. Okay, so I don't think there is any question. So let me go back to the lecture. So now what we will do is that let us see, now that we understand some science to storytelling, let us try to see if we can borrow this science into engineering lectures. So what I'll do is I'll actually go through a very quick demo lecture, and I will show that how the lecture itself looks like a story. So I will actually talk about introduction to neural networks. So I think many people are interested in machine learning, and many people are aware of neural networks. But again, doesn't matter if you do not understand the technicalities. Just try to see if you understand the narration, if you understand how the lecture is being structured. Okay, so so now I'm just getting into the demo lecture. So this is how, as if I'm giving a lecture on neural networks. So this is what is a normal day in your life. You get up in the morning, unlock your phone, and the phone shows up a few notifications on the top news of the day. So when you're doing this, what your phone is actually using is it's using what are known as news aggregators, which pulls up news from different places and then finds out what is going to be a more interesting news for you, right? So a lot of times this is personalized. Like, for example, if you want sports news, it might show you news about sports articles. If you like politics, it might show you news about political articles. So it somehow ranks, somehow knows what you are interested in, and aggregates news and shows you a ranked list of what are going to be your interesting, what news is going to be more interesting to you. Further down the day, what you do is you switch on your laptop on your breakfast table and you check your mail. You log into a social networking site, maybe Twitter or Facebook, and check up your messages. Again, you see there are a lot of applications which are helping you out. Like your mail is using spam filters, which sort of say that what mails are interesting mails and what are spam mails. Your social networking sites like Facebook or Twitter, they are trying to show you notifications saying that they are trying to suggest friends saying why don't you connect with this person, or they are trying to block certain posts saying that these are posts that we should not show to people. um, Later down the day, you get into your car and then you switch on your navigation. So again, your navigation system is using map applications to suggest what are the best routes to take, which routes are busy routes. Um, then you get back, uh, while getting back from your office, you remember that you have to order groceries and you log into an online shopping site. Again, the shopping site is using some algorithms to find out interesting advertisements to show you. It is giving you product recommendations. It is saying that these are what you might be interested in. So all these applications like news aggregators, spam filters, map applications, product recommendations, all these applications use machine learning algorithms. And we cannot deny, but machine learning algorithms has really permeated deep into your very everyday life. So let us try to see how machine learning algorithms really operate. So let us take the example of spam filters. So what machine learning algorithms do is that they collect what are called a set of features. For a spam filter, the interesting features could be, for example, the sender's domain, from what domain the mail was sent, sender's name, does the name look like a genuine name or a fake name, or the time when the mail was sent, from what location was it sent. So you can sort of create multiple features about the mail. And then as an output, the algorithm must classify the output as the spam, it being a spam mail or not being a spam mail. So should it go to your spam folder or should it go to your remain in your inbox? So essentially what the machine learning algorithm is doing is it is learning a function that can differentiate spam mail from actual mail, from interesting mail. And deep neural networks or DNNs are perhaps the biggest buzzword in ML today, in machine learning today. And let us try to see that how do deep neural networks try to solve this problem? How they are able to learn a function. So how can we try to make ML algorithms learn a function? And so essentially, the main problem with this is, why is it even an interesting challenge? Why is it even a difficult thing to do? So the problem is that learning a function, an arbitrarily a function, is difficult because the function can be an arbitrarily complex function. It can be like absolutely a very difficult any function in the world that you might be interested in learning. And the other is you can only have access to a set of finite data points. So only from a finite set of data points, you have to learn a very complex function, right? So the function of something being spam mail might be very, very complicated, but you only have access to a set of very small mails that you can train your algorithm on. So let us take a very concrete example. Let us say that somehow y and x are my features, and what I want to figure out is that is 40 times of y is equal to x squared. So or you can think of it as a function that y is equal to 1 by 40 of x squared. So we are trying to, let us say we want to learn this particular function. So instead what we'll do is we'll try to pose it as a regression problem, and we will say that we are interested in finding out if x square is greater than 40 of y or not. Right? So if it is yes, then I say it is labeled true. If it is false, I would say it is labeled false. Right? So so in this case, the way I have set up this particular problem, I have taken x and y as my features, and the function that I would learn is of the form x square is greater than 40y, and it can output a boolean value, either true or false, to say what is it, let's say for example, is it spam or not spam. So to begin with, we will sort of do a review of some topics in linear algebra. We will understand what are transformations. We will understand concept of row space, column space, and so on. And then we will get into the other important thing we need to talk about is calculus, and we will understand the most important thing we will look at into calculus is what are referred to as gradients. Again, because it's a demo lecture, I will not get into the review part, but you can imagine that a regular lecture you would have a few slides which we will actually set up the review and tell you these important concepts that are required to understand the rest of the lecture. Now, so the primary component that we would use to run our classification is this, what is referred to as a perceptron. So a perceptron looks as follows. So your inputs x and x1 essentially can be put together in what is referred to as a layer. So you just put them together, and you have a set of wires connecting them to a single processing unit, which is this blue shape, which is called a perceptron. And this processing unit will do some computations and give out a result in the output layer, which is either it is spam or not spam, right? So this is how our network or our algorithm would look like. So essentially the transformation that the perceptron does, or the computation that the perceptron does, looks as follows. So essentially it only does a linear transformation. It multiplies what are called weights, H1 and H2, and a bias B to my inputs x and y. So essentially what it is doing is it is doing h1 times x1 plus h2 times x2 plus b. So that is the computation that my perceptron is doing. And after this computation is done, this is passed on to what is referred to as a ReLU unit. It's a non-linear activation function, which is very simple, which simply does a max of this value with 0. So essentially what it does is, if this value of x times h1 times h1 times x1 plus h2 times x2 plus b, if this value is less than 0, it simply emits 0. If it is greater than 0, then it emits the same value that it computes. That is all the computation that the perceptron does. So now the purpose of our machine learning algorithm is first to do what is referred to as training. So during training, what we will do is we will try to find out this weight matrix h1, h2b. So we will try to find out values h1, h2b such that our network predicts well, which means that it learns the right function such that whenever I get a spam, it outputs it is a spam. Whenever it is not spam, it outputs it is not spam. Right? So you can think of it the way the classification is set up. You can think of this, it emits a value which the ReLU gives, and you compute values both for y1 and y2. Right? And whatever value comes out larger, we will just pick that value. So somehow y1 and y2 gives us the confidence as to, y1 and y2, essentially the value is basically the confidence with which I can say it is spam or not spam. Let's say y1 says it is spam, y2 says it is not spam. Now if I try to run this perceptron, if I build a network, you do this computation on this perceptron for the example that we talked about of 40 times x squared is greater than 40y. For this particular problem, we get a classifier which looks as follows. So if you see, there is a line only at y equals 0. So it separates all the positive values from the negative values. So it just learns one line. So it is almost only as good as linear regression. So it only is able to classify things with a line which is saying what are positive values and what are negative values. That is all it is able to do. So what can we do? So one thing that we might do, one idea that we might use, is to increase the number of perceptrons in the hidden layer. So this is the second layer is referred to as a hidden layer because it is neither input nor output. And one thing we can do is we can increase the number of perceptrons in the hidden layer. So each of so what it is doing is it is increasing the computations that we are able to do. So so now we do more computations. We do one computation for H1, one computation for H2, and then use those computed values to finally find out our results at the output layer. Now, I actually built a neural network with this particular schematic, and the function now looks as follows. So you see that it is sort of better approximates the function, the previous function, but now it is, but it is still not very nice. You cannot. It's sort of only a. You can see two lines, so you can. It's just a piecewise linear approximation with only two pieces. So it is some approximation. It is still not a very good approximation of that particular curve. So it should be a parabola, right? So it sort of looks like a parabola, but it is surely not a parabola. So what if we increase the number of neurons in the hidden layer? If we increase it more, so if we increase it to 120 neurons, then we start seeing a shape which resembles a parabola. So you can still see that it's a piecewise linear approximation. You can actually see lines, lot of lines, and with this set of lot of lines, it is able to approximate a figure very similar to a parabola. What if we increase it to 1200 neurons? See, the shape gets much better. It's such a very nice smooth shape that you get. So now it is very clearly able to separate out the the region where y square is greater than 40x and the region where it is not. Right? So you have these two very distinct regions, the brown region and the blue region, which separates out these two spaces, and you can see the decision boundary is a very nice smooth curve. So this brings us to a very interesting theorem in neural networks referred to as the universal approximation theorem. So given by Ian Goodfellow. So what he said is that so the universal approximation theorem says is that a feed-forward network with a so this is quoted from a paper by this, but it is a very well-known theorem and has been established very well in the literature. So I just quote this thing from the way he describes it in his one of his papers. So he says that a feed-forward neural network with a single layer is sufficient to represent any function, and the layer may be infeasibly large and may be difficult to learn and generalize correctly, but there surely exists some neural network which can approximate any function you give, right? So essentially, to breaking it down, what it says is that you give me any arbitrary function in the world, I will always be able to build one neural network with a single hidden layer to approximate that function very well. It's a different matter that that particular layer might have a very impractical number of neurons, and it might be very difficult to learn it, but nonetheless there does exist such a network. So and that is something we had seen, like even this function we could see that we could sort of approximate it with a large number of neurons at about 1200 neurons. But even for this very simple function y equals, like, which looks similar to y equals x square, a parabolic equation, we needed that many neurons. We needed like 1200 neurons. I mean, in real life, ML algorithms have to learn much more complicated functions, and then your number of neurons can be really large, really exorbitant. So what can we do about it? So what is the problem if we have a lot of neurons? The problem is that training becomes hard. You have to learn a lot of weights, and then with you need a lot of data to learn a lot of weights. So it becomes almost impractical to learn a network with a very large number of neurons, because at the end of the day you still have some data. I mean, mostly not much data. So how can we have a network with lesser number of neurons? And one solution to this is to increase the number of hidden layers. So instead of increasing the number of layers in the same hidden layer, we can increase the number of hidden layers altogether. And this is interesting because it causes some sort of multiplicative effect. And you can see that even with two layers, with just 60 neurons in each layer, that is a total of 120 neurons, we get a curve which is very similar to the curve that we got with 1200 neurons, right? So we were able to get almost a 10x decrease in the number of the neurons that we needed, and we got almost the same quality of prediction just by putting them on two different layers instead of using putting them all in the same layer. Right, and essentially this is possible because it causes some sort of multiplicative effect. I mean, you do some computations in the first layer, and the result of those computations can be used as the base values for the computations in the next layer, right? So it causes some sort of multiplicative, some sort of compounding effect, which allows you to get a lot of power in the machine. So to summarize, the neural network consists of a set of neurons, a set of weights for each wire connecting the neurons, and there are these non-linear activations which essentially detect that how do you switch it, like how do you switch the neurons. In this case, in our case, we just decided to use the ReLU function. The ReLU function is switched off, that is it emits 0 for all negative values, and it's switched on, that it gives out the same value that it gets for all positive values. So other than ReLU, there are many other activation functions. There is something called the sigmoid function, there is the tanh function, and people, for depending on their needs, might use different activation functions. The fully connected layer essentially is a transformation, is essentially a linear transformation, where the transformer is nothing but it can be represented as a matrix operation, as a matrix multiplication operation, and then it is composed by the linear activation of the ReLU. That is what a layer does. That is the computation. That's what summarizes the computation in a layer. And then to increase the power of the machine, I can compose multiple layers. I can put multiple layers together. And often you have what is called a softmax layer at the end, which tries to uh, like normalize the values at the end. Anyway, I think we have not discussed it. It's not interesting for this time. So this is a lecture on neural networks. It's a very crisp lecture. We do not have too much time, but we will try to see that how we can see elements of a story even within this particular lecture. So we started off by saying that try to think about a normal day in your life, right? And in your life, you have news aggregators, spam filters, map applications, product recommendation systems, all working for you, right? So this is the exposition part, right? This is the exposition part of your lecture. Notice the second person narration, right? So the narration style is second person narration, where I bring the class into the narration. I say, think that you are there where you get up in the morning and unlock your phone, right? So you are placing the class in the story or in the lecture and saying, what would you do in such a situation? In this case, the ML algorithm is the protagonist because we are trying to see how can we develop the ML algorithm better uh, for it to work for us. And we made it, to begin with, we made it a likable character. We made it a character that we will be interested to listen about. We will be like to listen to the story of how ML works, right? And we did that. We gave a motivation. So in some sense, we gave a motivation for you to attend the lecture. This is often in a story referred to as the hook, right? So you have put a hook as to why you would like to listen to the lecture by saying that this is an important thing that exists today, and everything that you do, I mean, be it from checking your mails to driving your car, is using ML algorithms, and that is why it is something that we do care about, and this is something that we would like to uh, hear about in the lecture, right? So if you do not set up the motivation for your lecture properly, then the class will not be hooked. They will not be interested in listening to your lecture. And that is why it is important to show why is your lecture important for the class. And that is exactly the way why would be a storyteller tells us why would you like to read this story or why would you like to watch this movie. Right? So this is the exposition part where you set up the hook to say that why is why would you like to listen to this story? What is the setting of the story and why would you like to listen to this story? Now, in the second slide, we talked about the goal of an ML algorithm, and we said that it is to learn a function. And imagine that you want to learn a spam filter, and then we would like to differentiate between the spam and actual mail, and we bring in this idea of deep neural networks. So this is a slide where we continue with the exposition. And an interesting thing to see here is that we actually move to third person narrative here, right? So the narration style in the lecture can change narrative, right? So from the second person narration, we get down to third person narration, where you say that CML algorithms are good and you can use them. And so it gets into the third person narrative style. And we improve our backstory, right? So we improve our backstory saying that, okay, think about this spam filter. I mean, think about you want to differentiate between these two things, spam mail and mail that is not spam. And then there are deep neural networks, and this is what I would like to discuss today. So we work on the character, we see with the setting as to how it works. So we talk about there are these features, and then there is this output function. This is how the character works. So we show you the normal day in the life of the character in some sense, right? So this is how we show the a normal day in the life of an ML algorithm. How does an ML algorithm work? Then the third slide, we get into seeing that why is it difficult to build an ML algorithm? Why should you even sit for this lecture? I mean, why is it not easy to do it? So essentially, it requires you to learn a complex function, and you can only look at a few data points. This is what you describe here. So this is where you bring in the inciting action. It introduces a conflict. It says that there is a challenge, there is a problem, there is a difficulty in learning ML algorithms, and that is why it requires some interesting ideas. And those are the ideas you would like to listen to in the rest of the class, right? So it sets up a conflict. It sets up a challenge. It says that it is not easy to learn an ML algorithm. These can be very hard functions. There are very few data points to learn from. So how do you do it that now the reader or the listener or the class starts thinking that, oh, this is really difficult. How can you actually come up with an algorithm which can learn any function in the world? And it sort of sets up a conflict between the algorithm and the constraints, right? So the algorithm is the protagonist, which side then, and the constraints are it's like trying to beat up the constraints and say, even with there being these constraints, how can I learn this particular these functions? Um, then we talk about that, let's learn a function, let's learn this particular function. We pose it as a regression problem, and I give you a concrete function to learn, right? So this is the rising action part of it. This is the rising action part of it, where we say that where would you how would you try to learn let's try to learn the network. And very interesting part here is that we try to concretize the goal. We concretize the goal from saying that you learn any function, we want to learn any arbitrary function, to saying, let me just give you one function and let us see if I can have an ML algorithm which can learn that function. So remember the importance of what we talked about, having a concrete goal. Why did the goal of Lagan had to be winning a cricket match and not just Champane becoming happy? Because that is where the audience starts connecting with us and says that, okay, let us say that how can that concrete goal be met? And that is why we take one example, one complicated example, and not so complicated example rather, and say that let us see even if we can learn this particular function. Then we say that, okay, we need to review some material before we can get there. And this is sort of the training that you need your class to go through before they can even start understanding the So this actually like shows our rising action. It shows that what you need to understand before getting into learning neural networks. So the next few slides, they will talk about what are transformations, and each of these things might have a story in their own right? And you might have want to say that why you are transforming. You might want to set the hook again for why do you want to learn about transformations. You want to set the hook again as to say why do you want to learn calculus and gradients, right? So again, they have their own climaxes. So all of them will have their own sub story, and this is how you will say that how do you prepare the class, how do you have prepare the class to listen to get into the climax, to say what you exactly want to teach in the rest of the class. Then we had the lecture. After finishing with the review material, you get into the lecture where you talk about the perceptron, and this is where you get into the climax, right? It says that okay, I can come up with a small network which can do that, right? but but does it work, right? So that is where the suspend tilts in, right? It says that okay, I can have this simple perceptron structure where you have a single compute unit which can look at the inputs and try to give us an output, and it has very simple structure. It's just a nonlinear activation function applied to a linear transformation. But is it interesting? And we see that it does not work, right? It is as good only as a linear transformation. It doesn't work. And this is the place where we use show don't tell. I actually created this network, and I plotted it and I showed that it does not work. So this is where instead of telling that it doesn't work, I actually ran the data through a neural network, trained the network, and plotted the output and showed that it does not work, right? So this is where we use the principle of show don't tell. And you see that there is this, it gets us into the falling action, right? I mean, it is sort of getting us into, so we can see that there is something we can do to this. We have won a small battle, but then there's still the war to be won. So it shows a mini plot point where the protagonist has sort of lost one small battle. Like there is like you are able to do something, but you are not able to build a good classifier yet. Then we get into another twist in the story, and we say okay, let us try to increase the number of neurons. So again, it comes back to another mini plot point in the falling action, and this is the plot point of high. So why not get more neurons? Good idea, looks like an interesting idea. What happens there? And this again brings us to this plot, and this plot again says that oh, this is interesting, we can do it. And it again shows that again, show don't tell. It shows you that you get some high, right? Because you have won the battle slightly better than the previous battle, but you still lost it overall. Like you did better than the previous battle, but you got a slightly better curve, but still not the curve that you wanted to get. And then you get into another mini plot point, I mean, where you get still higher. You give another idea where the protagonist tries to do something more. The ML algorithm tries to do something more, where you increase the number of neurons, and this is again a high plot point, because it shows that okay, I can learn still better functions. And then the tension increases and says that okay, if you have 1200 neurons, it looks cool. It really looks that we have really been able to learn the function very well. And then we quote the universal approximation theorem, and it is sort of a mini climax, because it says that oh, this is really great. There is a theorem, there is a mathematical theorem which says that it really works, that if you increase the number of neurons, at some point or the other, you will always be able to learn any arbitrary function. But there is again a low. So this is a low. This is a mini falling low in the falling action. It says that okay, you needed 1200 neurons for this. Even a simple function like this, you needed 1200 neurons. This is not feasible, because training such a network will be very, very high. So what can we do? So again, you are in a fix, and you have the protagonist. The algorithm will again have to come back with an idea to defeat the antagonist, which in this case is you are bombarded with a large number of neurons. And the idea that the protagonist gets or the algorithm gets is to increase the number of hidden layers. And again, you see a high. Again, there is another battle that this the protagonist wins, the ML algorithm wins, and and you get a high. This says, oh, this looks like a cool idea, and eventually you plot you show don't tell, plot a curve with a neural network with 60 neurons in each layer, and you get such a cool curve, and that gives you the resolution that says that we indeed can build a practical neural network with some layers with a small number of neurons which can predict or which can approximate any arbitrary function in quite well, somewhat well, right? So we reach the resolution of the story, and then we sort of, now there is a complete fall in the action. Now we get into the, now we are all settled, we know how to solve this problem. So now this is just a summary. It says that now, you know, we have got to a new place in our normalcy. Before we did not even know how to learn a function, but now we know how to learn arbitrary functions. And then it summarizes saying, okay, there are different types of activation functions that you can use. This is not the only type. And this is something like you are sort of you get a happily live ever after for your lecture, right? So you see, now your neural networks can live happily ever after because they know how to learn any arbitrary function. So you could imagine that you could have told the story different way. Another way, instead of using a third person narrative, you could have used a used a first person narrative. You could have made the neural network as the guy who's telling the story. You could have said that, okay, I cannot learn it with only a few neurons. I need more neurons. You can say things in such a way. And so there are multiple narrative styles you can use even when you're delivering lecture that makes the content more interesting to the class. To conclude my lecture, the art of storytelling is quite mature. There have been numerous books and articles, people discussing, contradicting each other as to how do you tell stories. And uh, and I think as academicians, we should borrow from the science of storytelling to infuse life into our lectures. Uh, Rather than our lectures being mundane, monotonic monologues, um, we would like them to be more interesting, and a story is something which can hook an audience. And more importantly, today, I mean, we as teachers have a more difficult job than ever before. Um, our students are constantly sitting on their mobiles, um, going through their Facebook posts, looking at their emails, talking to their friends, writing messages to each other, and it is that much more difficult to grab their attention, right? So this is what I call the curse of smartphones, because the attention span of the reviewers of the class has really come down, and that is why it is important to make our lectures more engaging. And what better than telling them stories rather than delivering lectures? And this is only the tip of the iceberg, and we need to adopt and adapt the science of storytelling to the art to the science of lecturing in engineering classes. So with that, I end my discussion. Of course, I hope this is, as many movies say, the beginning, and I hope you will be able, we all as academicians will be able to make learn from something from the art of storytelling and deliver better lectures. With that, I close my talk. I will be very happy to discuss. So many things I said were probably controversial, and I would be very happy to listen to differing views from the audience. I mean, if you agree with me, don't agree with me, I will really be happy to listen to you.
Yes, participants, any queries or any questions?
Or agreements and disagreements. So this is what is my take on this topic. But of course, a thing could be. I mean, you might uh, think of things differently.
So, sir, we assume no queries or any questions from participants. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. It was a very informative lecture from you. Thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for inviting me. It was really great giving a lecture at this venue. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, sir.